Hey, how's it going? My name is Terrence Wood, and already in the year of 2020, we've lost two amazing sports figures, really two icons in their sports. Ironically, both of these gentlemen wore the number 24. One of them, you guys probably have already guessed it, and it's Kobe Bryant. And so many people have talked about Kobe Bryant and what Kobe Bryant meant to them. And whether you liked Kobe or you didn't, I wasn't the biggest Kobe fan in the world, but you had to respect his work ethic. You had to respect the fact that this man had so much responsibility and so many expectations placed on him for such a young person to come onto the national scene, really the worldwide stage, and to have that much expectation placed on him at 17 years old, and for him to fulfill many of the proclamations that the greats thought is amazing. You know, somebody can have all the talent in the world, but to really maximize that talent and make the most of it, kudos to Kobe. We all know the Mamba mentality, and that's the best way to carry his legacy forward. Once again, whether you believed in Kobe being a great person or not, whether you liked him or not, you had to respect at least what he did as a professional on the court, and then what he was doing transitioning to a professional off the court, a businessman, a philanthropist, an entrepreneur. He's done so much for the sport of basketball, even women's basketball. And you can tell when somebody passes away, all the well wishes, all the prayers, all the people that come out in support of that person really is a testament to what type of person that person is. You know, when you're not in the room to defend yourself or to speak on behalf of yourself, which is important for a lot of you young athletes to realize what are people saying about you. And the majority, the overwhelming majority of things said about Kobe Bryant has been amazing from what I could see. It seems like a lot of people really cared about him and his family. So that is definitely one icon, a worldwide icon, especially a transformational sports figure in basketball that we all fell for when him and the other people that passed on that helicopter, his daughter included, we all fell for that situation, and it kind of put all of us on notice that nothing is promised. The other sports icon that passed away recently is somebody who is a sports icon, a transformational sports figure. Many of you guys might not be aware of this individual, but I've been aware of him, and he's actually family to me. He's my grandfather, and that gentleman's name is Willie Wood. And I haven't posted anything about my grandfather's passing. Totally different situation than Kobe's. We did expect for my grandfather not to have too much more time, unfortunately, on earth. But obviously, his spirit is with us, and that's just his physical being leaving us for now. But with my grandfather, I never post things irrationally. At least I try not to, without thinking about them first. Because my grandfather was a public figure, a lot of people were already contacting me and my family to pass on their condolences. And if you were one of those people, I thank you tremendously. I don't think I was fully really ready to deal with it because my grandfather was such a big figure in my family and in my life. It's interesting because many people probably idolize their grandpa for many different reasons, whether he was strong or he did things in the community or the way maybe he treated you. So a lot of people can affiliate with idolizing their grandpa, but I don't think a lot of people can affiliate with other people idolizing their grandpa, even people that maybe he didn't meet. And I had some instances and some chances to see what he meant to other people, which was special for me to see because I didn't get to see my grandfather play live. You know, outside of some film, I didn't get to see him play live. He tremendously was a catalyst for my career. I'm a former football player, played in college and also a little bit professionally. And I always knew I wanted to play football, but once I saw my grandfather get inducted into the Hall of Fame and place that gold blazer upon his shoulders, I was through. I knew what I wanted to do with the rest of my life. To see him stand up there on that Hall of Fame podium with so much confidence, to see the respect that my grandfather deserved and got from so many of his peers and others. I just wanted the same thing. And unfortunately, in my career, I didn't even come nowhere close to what my grandfather accomplished. And he had so many more hurdles placed in front of him than I did. My grandfather is an icon because he is the first ever black quarterback in the Pacific Coast Conference, which is now the Pac-12 Conference. A lot of you guys thought maybe it was a Rodney P. or a Warren Moon, but it was actually my grandfather at the University of Southern California. He was recruited by a legend himself in Al Davis. My grandfather was born in 1936, where there wasn't a lot of opportunity, you guys. It was either the military, or if you were a phenomenal athlete, maybe you could make it as a student athlete and a professional athlete. Totally different times. So he had to be extremely talented for somebody like Al Davis on the West Coast to spot him on the East Coast. He brought him all the way to a small junior college in California named Coalinga, and then he ended up bringing him to USC, where my grandfather was a quarterback. He was throwing the ball. He was a predominantly running quarterback, but he was a quarterback, which was unheard of in those times, especially at that level. My grandfather actually ended up becoming a team captain. So it just spoke to his character, it spoke to his work ethic, it spoke to Al Davis being right. So my grandfather was such a catalyst, you guys, for my career. Some of the things, when you look back on somebody's history, some of the things that you may find in their history is for a reason. And a couple things that a lot of people may never know that were from my grandfather. One is because I played quarterback, because my grandfather was a quarterback, and he told my father, hey, we want your son to get the most exposure, my grandson to get the most exposure he possibly can, so he should play quarterback because the ball is in his hands 24/7. So I played quarterback from the age of 9 all the way until I was 17 years old, and went off to the University of Colorado and then switched to defensive back. Part of the reason why, when I was at the University of Colorado and a lot of my professional career, I wore the number 23 was because I wanted to wear 24 at Colorado, but it was retired. And I couldn't get it out of retirement, and they gave me the next best thing. So it's kind of like, why is he 23? Well, the reason why is because I couldn't wear 1, which was what I wore in high school, and I couldn't wear 24, which was what my grandfather wore, and that's how I defaulted to 23. But any time I got the opportunity, I was wearing 24 because that name Wood on the back and what that stood for. In the football industry, and obviously within my family. My grandfather had a certain reverence within our family, and then outside of our family. I'll tell you guys one story that I'll never forget. And once again, my grandfather came from different times. So, in today's world, a lot of people are fend for themselves. They're all out for themselves. Unfortunately, even some of these athletes are out for themselves. Back when my grandfather was coming up, the athletes represented the community. Your Muhammad Ali's, your Jackie Robinsons, these people represented the community. So for one, we definitely didn't see as much self-sabotage, because these gentlemen fully knew the weight of what they were taking on and the burden that they bear. So they were representing the community. So when my grandfather went from D.C., Washington, D.C., to the West Coast, it wasn't just his dreams that he was holding in his hands. He was holding the dreams of so many others that would never have the same opportunity. And I got a chance to really feel that once when my grandfather We went to see him in D.C. This was probably about 5 years ago, so maybe he's about 78 years old. And he passed away at 83. And unfortunately, my grandfather suffered from very severe dementia. Many times towards the end of his life, when we went to visit him, we had to remind him of who we were. And that was something that I know it was hard for my dad and some of the other family members, and also for myself, but I didn't get to go back to the East Coast as much as my father. So one time we went back to the East Coast, and once again, this just illustrates the meaning behind the man. So once we went back to the East Coast and we wanted to let my grandfather get some fresh air, and at this time, if we were going to bring him out of the home he was in, we had to bring him in a wheelchair. So we brought him outside in his wheelchair, and we were just shooting the breeze, talking, and he's just listening, because with the dementia, he didn't have the stories off the top of his head like he used to share with us. So me and my father are talking, and sure enough, you guys, two older gentlemen come walking down the sidewalk, and they notice my grandfather. Now, these gentlemen had to be in their late 60s or early 70s. And they noticed my grandfather, two African-American elderly men, noticed my grandfather, rushed over. They said, "Hey, is this Mr. Willie Wood?" We said, "Yes." And they said, "We heard you were living somewhere around here." And they just started to express, you guys, how much my grandfather meant to them and how he gave them energy sometimes when they felt like they weren't going to make it out, or there wasn't nothing bright in their life to talk about or to think about. They could always point to my grandfather, Willie Wood, and say, "Hey, he's from our neighborhood. I know him. I used to play with him at the park," or "That's my guy," and it would give them a sense of joy. And I got to sit there as a fly on the wall and listen to two older gentlemen, two elderly gentlemen, two gentlemen that I would move out of the way for if I'm walking on the sidewalk, talk about my grandfather being their childhood hero. That was absolutely amazing to me. That was absolutely amazing to me. My grandfather was a stoic and a gentleman to a certain extent. When you play in the NFL and you are so great, I mean, he went to 8 Pro Bowls. They didn't count all the All-Pros, but I think they counted 8 of his All-Pros, which is the most by any Green Bay Packer. I think if you look on the Pro Football Hall of Fame, it has it as 9 All-Pros, which is more than Reggie White's, more than Aaron Rodgers, any of these people that these people idolize today that are Green Bay Packers. Very much so his era's Ed Reed. He's very much so his era's Ed Reed, where he could tackle, he would clock you if you come across the middle and you were slipping, you weren't paying attention. And then also he was offensive minded and savvy enough to make interceptions and get the ball back to the offense or create offense on his own. Used to be a punt returner, led the league in punt returns before. He will always hold records that nobody can take away and that are so cherished. I know by him when he was alive and by us as his family. One of them is he'll have the first ever NFL Super Bowl interception. Nobody will ever be able to have the first ever Super Bowl interception. My grandfather holds that record. He is the first ever modern day black head coach, with the Philadelphia Bell and the defunct league back. I think it was the WFL league that was defunct back in the day. He coached in Canada. He was the first head black coach in Canada, the Toronto Argonauts. So these are marks that will never be taken away, that are huge, huge marks, huge accolades, huge accomplishments that were definitely not easy in any time, but especially back then in his time. So true trendsetter, true icon, especially the older generation, true icon, sports figure, my grandfather. A lot of times, you guys, once again, somewhat of a stoic individual because he had a tough childhood. A lot of kids did back in those days, and then also just because the nature of the sport he played. I mean, he played for Vince Lombardi. Vince Lombardi was a no bullshit coach, and he loved my grandfather. So you know, my grandfather was a no bullshit player. You know, and you could sense that in being around him. He wasn't one to throw an excuse at, but he was also very loving. One of the things that I will always miss, because you know, some people admire somebody like my grandfather from afar, but I got to see him when he wasn't being Willie Wood, the Pro Hall of Fame, Pro Football Hall of Famer. You know, I got to see him as just grandpa. I didn't get to spend as much time with him as I would have liked because he was always busy. And at the time when I was hustling playing ball, you know, it just was like ships passing in the night. But every once in a while where we would get a chance to spend time, it was always special. There would be a buzz even around the family that grandpa was coming into town. And his thing was, hey, baby. You know, that was his thing. Is hey, baby. You know, I'm going to miss that hey, baby. You know, that was his thing to let you know that it was just almost like he was from the country, to let you know that he was grandpa, he loved about you and cared, and that's how he responded when I walked in the room is, hey, baby, you know, so I'm going to miss that about my grandfather. I'm going to miss his snoring. He used to snore loud as heck, and I used to just be like, nobody in the world snores as loud as my grandfather, but I'm gonna miss his snoring. You know, the moments I didn't give myself the time, you know, a week ago to really think about some of the moments that I had with him, some of the stories that other people told me about him. It was busy last week. There was a lot going on. My mother's suffering from stage 4 cancer, so it was just a lot. But I didn't want to let another week go by without giving my grandfather his proper love and respect. I love my grandfather dearly. One story in particular was from a friend of his named Bob Schmidt. Went to the University of Southern California with him. Was actually his backup quarterback, Uncle Bob. And he was talking about how my grandfather wore a suit everywhere he went on campus. It was because he wanted people to know that he was there as a student athlete. He wasn't the custodian. He wasn't somebody, this was the 60s, you guys. He wasn't somebody that was lost on campus. He was the university starting quarterback of Southern Cal. You know, University of Southern Cal starting quarterback. And he had to let people know that he was about business. He was focused, so he wore a suit. They used to say, Willie, it's hot as hell out here. Why you got the suit on? He had to be different. He had to move differently than everybody else. I remember being on my high school football field. Just me. These are the things you never forget. I'll never forget. Just my grandfather, my dad, and me. 3 generations of Woods, all football players. My grandfather was in town. He came to see me play my senior year in high school. I was a quarterback once again because of him. And my dad's across about 15 yards, 10 yards down the field, and I'm just firing it at my dad, trying to impress my grandfather who's standing there. He's an NFL legend, former pro coach, but he's my grandfather, and he's just standing there watching his grandson try to perfect the craft that he did so well. And I just remember firing that ball into my dad countless times for over an hour, just trying to impress my grandfather, trying to get that seal of approval, get that nod, you know. So doors have opened up for me and other family members because of my grandfather. So for you young athletes out there that want to do right by your parents, want to do right by your siblings, you've got people in your life you care about. If you do this football thing very well, you guys, You can set up lifetime opportunities for your family just because of how well you master your craft and because of the name on the back of your jersey. You can set up a great lifestyle also for your family. We've benefited tremendously by the sacrifices of my grandfather, still do to this day. So I didn't want to let another day pass. This isn't a somber message. This is a message to let you guys know where we lost one icon that you all know in Kobe Bryant. We truly, truly lost another one, you guys. Just as important, and that's my grandfather. And rest in peace, William Vernell Wood, Willie Wood. I love you, 24. I miss you already, and can't wait to see you again. So, love you. Have a good one. Thank you guys for watching this. Please, if you don't know who Willie Wood is, do the research. It's worth it. I love you.